Have you ever caught yourself talking to the TV or eating straight from a jar of peanut butter without even using a spoon? Not because you're lazy, but because no one's watching. No one minds. Living alone after 60 can be peaceful, but it can also quietly lead us into habits that slowly shrink our world. One day, you realize you've been wearing the same pair of socks for 3 days straight. Why? Because no one's around to say otherwise. This video doesn't talk about the obvious things. It's about 10 subtle patterns that slowly sneak in when you live alone and make you feel smaller, more disconnected, less like yourself. And today, I want to speak to you like an old friend, someone who's been there. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Which city, which country? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if something in this video resonates with you, consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep walking this road together, one gentle step at a time. 1. Don't let eating become a lonely chore. One of the saddest things that happens when you live alone is that eating turns into a task you just want to get over with. I remember Mr. Martin, a neighbor in his 70s who lived alone after losing his wife. He was great with tools, could fix anything around the house, but put him in front of a stove and he looked like it might explode. He once told me, "What's the point of cooking a full meal? It's just me." So his meals became crackers, peanut butter, canned soup. Whatever was closest. I once saw him eating cold soup straight from the can with a wooden spoon. He smiled and said, "It's not so bad when your tongue goes numb." We laughed, but I could see it. That kind of eating wears a person down. You stop looking forward to meals. And suddenly, a whole rhythm of life disappears. Eating is not just about calories. It's a ritual. It reminds you that you're still alive, still worth preparing something for. One afternoon, I asked Martin to help fix my bookshelf. After we finished, I surprised him with a simple lunch: grilled cheese, warm tomato soup, and a cold beer. He paused, looked down at the plate, and said, "I haven't felt like this in a long time, like I'm really eating." From that day on, he made little changes. He bought real plates, used a cloth napkin like his wife used to, put on music, lit a candle sometimes, even invited me over once in a while. Even if you're alone, make your meals special. Eat like you're expecting company, because maybe that guest is you, the version of you that still wants to feel alive. Have you ever caught yourself just eating to get by? If yes, leave a comment with the number 1. If meals still feel joyful to you, type 0. Even the smallest moment, like sitting down to a sandwich with a napkin, can start to bring joy back into your life. Up next, let's talk about another quiet companion that takes over your space before you know it. The TV? 2. Don't let the TV become your passive roommate. Sometimes the house is just too quiet. No calls, no footsteps, no clinking dishes in the kitchen. So we turn on the TV, and soon it becomes the only voice in the room. I've been there. After a tough season, I left my TV on from sunrise to nightfall. Told myself it was just background noise. But truth is, I was avoiding silence. Because silence makes you ask hard questions. What do I really want to do today? And sometimes you don't know. I remember reading a comment from Charles, 76. He wrote, "My TV is like my roommate now. We don't talk, but we're always together." That hit me. Because the TV feels like company, but it's passive company. It doesn't ask you to move, to think, to respond. You sit there, and time just rolls on. One day, I realized I had spent 4 hours watching arthritis cream commercials without even noticing the sun had gone down. So I made a change. I stopped turning it on first thing. Instead, I had coffee, went for a walk, stretched a little, solved a crossword puzzle. Then, if I truly wanted to watch something, I picked one show, one movie, and I turned it off when it ended. At first, the silence felt strange, but slowly I began to hum again. I picked up books. I called old friends. The space the TV used to fill became mine again, not cutting the cord, just cutting the dependence. Because you're still the main character in your own story, not a background extra in someone else's. If you've ever found yourself watching just to fill the quiet, leave a comment with the number 2. If you only watch when you choose to, type 0. Let's take the remote back into our own hands. Next, I want to talk about a different kind of barrier. Not a screen, but a door. Your front door. And how it can quietly become a wall if you're not careful. 3. Don't let your front door become a wall. There's a little white house at the end of my old street. White picket fence, wild roses spilling across the walkway, and a front porch that seems to whisper, "Come sit for a while, have some lemonade." That house belongs to Helen, 81 years old. But for a long time, that door stayed shut. After her husband passed, Helen slowly stopped coming outside. First it was the cold. Then her knees started acting up. And before long, staying inside just became routine. Her daughter arranged for groceries to be delivered. Medications came by mail. A friend from church installed a key lockbox. Helen no longer needed to open the door. One day, she told me, "If it weren't for the mailman, I'd forget the world was still spinning." I understood. Because when you start seeing the world, you begin to believe the world no longer sees you either. But then one spring morning, she said she opened the door just to let in the air. Carefully, she stepped out barefoot onto the porch. The sunlight touched her face. The breeze danced through her hair. A kid rode by on his bike and yelled, "Hi, Miss Helen." She smiled. The first real smile in weeks. Since then, she opens her front door every morning. Not always to go somewhere. Sometimes just to breathe. I started doing it too. Even if I'm not going out. I open the door, greet the trees, nod at the clouds. It reminds me, I'm still part of the world. The front door doesn't just block wind. If left closed too long, it also blocks out wonder. So open it. Even just a crack. Let the day in. If you've ever gone days without stepping out, leave a comment with the number 3. If you still start your mornings with a bit of fresh air, type 0. We don't need to go far to feel connected. Sometimes just cracking open the door is enough. Next, let's talk about a phrase that sounds harmless, but quietly locks us in place. I'm too old for that. 4, don't say I'm too old for that. I'm too old for that. It sounds like a fact. But really, it's a fence we build ourselves. I once talked with Joseph, 78, living in Texas. Last year, he started learning the ukulele. Not to become a performer. Just because he saw some kids playing music in the park and remembered how he'd once wanted to play too. He told me, "I'm old enough not to care who laughs, and still young enough to give it a try." The first few weeks, his fingers were stiff. The strings slipped. He had to rewatch tutorials 10 times. Even plugged the charger into the wrong port once. But he kept at it. And the day he played "You Are My Sunshine" all the way through, even with a few missed notes, his eyes sparkled like a child riding a bike for the first time. Then there's Linda, 74, Amar, who joined a salsa class just because, in her words, "My hips still move, why shouldn't I dance?" See, when people say, "I'm too old," they're not really talking about their body. They're talking about fear. Fear of looking silly, of failing, of being the oldest person in the room. But you know what? Failing at something new is better than succeeding at doing nothing. Don't let age be your excuse. Let it be your permission. You don't need to paddleboard or climb mountains. Maybe your new thing is coloring, chair yoga, or writing a haiku. What matters is that you still feel alive, that you're still growing. If you've ever held back because you thought you were too old, leave a comment with the number 4. If you're still willing to try new things, type 0. You haven't stopped growing. You've just been waiting to surprise yourself. And when you start saying yes again, you'll notice your world begins to expand. Which brings me to something else. A space that many of us slowly shrink into without even realizing. The bedroom. 5. Don't let your bedroom become your whole world. After I retired, I did something that might sound familiar. I started moving into my bedroom. Not just sleeping there. I brought in the TV, then my favorite chair, then snacks, books, water, remotes. Little by little, it became a whole life in one corner. The living room gathered dust. The dining table turned into a nap spot for the cat. I was living out of a single room, and no one said anything. That was the problem. When you live alone, it's easy to let your world shrink quietly. You stay where it's easy, where the charger's already plugged in, where the blanket is warmest. But one afternoon, I looked around and asked myself, how many days have I lived only in this space? And I didn't like the answer. A house isn't for camping. It's for living. So I made small changes. I had my coffee in the kitchen, even if just for 5 minutes. Read in the armchair by the window, not under the covers. Ate lunch at the dining table, even if it was just toast and soup. Put on music while folding laundry in the guest room. Bit by bit, I moved back in. Because your home reflects your life. And if your life shrinks to 4 walls and a bed, so does your spirit. Let your bedroom be a place of rest. Not the only place you exist. And maybe leave the snacks in the kitchen. Unless they're Oreos. I'm not a monster. If you've caught yourself spending most of your time in one room, leave a comment with the number 5. If you still move through your home and use the space, type 0. You don't have to do laps around the house every morning. Just show up fully, in the place you already call home. Next, let's talk about something many people misunderstand. Routines. And why they aren't boring at all. They're sacred. 6. Don't think routine means boredom. You've probably heard someone sigh and say, it's just another same old day, as if doing the same things means life is slipping away. But the truth is, routines aren't what drain our spark. They're what hold us steady when everything else is shifting. My Uncle Edward, a former Marine, lived with structure. He woke up every day at 6:15, brushed his teeth, brewed his coffee, then sat by the window and watched the birds for exactly 10 minutes. One day I asked, why not shake it up sometimes? He smiled and said, when life gets chaotic, I can always count on the birds and the coffee. And in that moment, I understood. Routine isn't meaningless repetition. It's a quiet anchor. It tells you, I'm still here. I'm still me. I once read a comment from Doris, 69 years old. She wrote, every night I wash my favorite teacup, even if I didn't use it that day. It's my way of saying, I was feeling, I'll be here tomorrow. That gave me chills. Because that's not just a habit. That's a promise. If you're feeling stuck in a rut, try one little twist. Change your tea flavor. Play music while vacuuming. Write your shopping list with your non-dominant hand. Let the day surprise you inside the structure. Routines don't kill joy. They give it room to show up. If you've ever felt like your days are just repeats, leave a comment with the number 6. If you've found peace in your daily rhythm, type 0. When you start seeing value in the little things, you'll begin to rediscover someone very important, the person in the mirror. 7. Don't ignore the person in the mirror. This might sound simple, but I want you to think about something. When was the last time you really looked in the mirror? Not a quick glance while brushing your teeth. Not fixing your collar. I mean really looking. Like you used to when you still wanted to show up for the world. I once met Mr. Walter, 81, at a senior group gathering. He wore neat khakis, a tucked-in shirt, polished shoes. What stood out wasn't his outfit. It was his eyes. Alive, present. Later, he shared something with me. He said, "There was a time I didn't look in the mirror for weeks. My hair was messy, my beard uneven. I wore the same clothes every day. Because, honestly, who was there to see me?" One day, walking past a mirror in a public restroom, he stopped. "I didn't recognize the man looking back at me," he said. Not because I was older, but because I had disappeared. From that moment, he made a change. Shaving again, combing his hair, choosing clothes that fit well, not to impress, but to remind himself that he still mattered. When you live alone, it's easy to feel unseen. But your reflection isn't about vanity. It's about dignity. It's a quiet way of saying, "I'm still here, I still count." So wear the flannel that fits just right. Put on the earrings that make you smile. Comb your hair like you're getting ready for a date, even if it's just with a crossword puzzle. And when you pass that mirror, don't look away. Smile. Maybe even wink. Because that face carries a story that deserves to be seen. If you've ever found yourself avoiding mirrors, leave a comment with the number 7. If you still greet yourself each day, type 0. When you can see yourself clearly again, you start realizing you still have so much left to share. And that sharing? It begins just next door, with the people who walk past your gate every single day. 8. Don't become the invisible neighbor. Something quiet happens when you live alone too long. You start fading from sight, from others, and from yourselves. There was a man on my street named Henry. He lived in a brick house with green shutters and a mailbox that squeaked. I passed by his house for years, but I didn't know a thing about him. Neither did anyone else. He never waved, never sat on the porch, never came to neighborhood gatherings. His lights were on every night, so we knew he was there. But he felt like a ghost. One summer, we had a power outage across the block. I went door to door to check on folks. When I knocked on Henry's door, he opened it in his bathrobe holding a flashlight. "You're the first person to knock in years," he said. And that stopped me cold. He thought we didn't want to bother him. We thought he wanted to be left alone. So for years, we lived side by side, but never truly saw each other. Living alone doesn't mean you have to disappear. But when you stop waving, stop saying hello, when you stop showing up, people start to forget you're there. And that's the real loss. Every neighborhood needs its elders. The ones who remember. The ones who keep the stories alive. You don't have to lead the block party. Just wave at the mail carrier. Say good morning to the dog walker. Let someone see you. That small hello? It might just be the beginning of something good. If you've ever felt like you've faded into the background, leave a comment with the number 8. If you still stay connected with neighbors, type 0. Sometimes all it takes to be remembered is giving someone the chance to see you again. And when you're seen, you begin to remember yourself too. Next, we'll talk about memories. How they hold us close. But if we're not careful, they can also hold us back. 9. Don't turn memories into a dusty museum. Some homes carry the past so deeply, You can almost breathe it in. Faded wedding photos. Tiny baby shoes in glass cases. Yellowed letters. A jacket still hanging on the back of a chair, like its owner might walk in at any moment. These memories are precious, but they can also become heavy when they take up all the space. I once visited Margaret, a kind woman who had lived alone for 10 years, since her husband passed. Her home was like a sealed time capsule. Nothing had been touched. His reading glasses still on the table. His coat still draped behind his office chair. She opened the door and said, "I've left it all just the way it was. Like maybe he'll come back." She paused, looked around, and said something I'll never forget. "I think I've turned this house into a shrine instead of a place to live." Then she asked me if I could take this room back. What would I do with it? After a moment of silence, she smiled gently and said, "Maybe I'd paint again. I used to love watercolor." So she began. Piece by piece. She kept his favorite book, his watch, a few special photos. The rest she boxed up or donated. And she turned that quiet, still room into a little art studio. The same space, but now filled with light and new colors. Memories don't ask you to stay stuck in the past. They ask you to carry them with you as you move forward. Keep the keepsakes. Honor the love. But don't freeze your own life trying to preserve someone else's ending. If you've ever felt like your home holds too much of the past, leave a comment with the number 9. If you've made space for something new, type 0. Because you are still here. And your story is not over. It's still being written. And speaking of stories still unfolding, let's talk about the most important myth of all. That we stop growing once we reach a certain age. 10. Don't think you've stopped growing. There's a lie that gets passed around quietly after 60. It says, your growing days are behind you. Now it's just about staying comfortable. But I don't believe that. And neither should you. I knew a man named Frank, 82 years old, living in Michigan. One Christmas, he learned Italian. Not because he was traveling, but because his daughter-in-law was Italian and always felt a bit left out at family dinners. That year, he raised his glass and said, "Buon Natale, grazie di essere con noi." Merry Christmas. Thank you for being here with us. She cried. So did he. Later, Frank told me, I didn't get every word right. But it was worth it just to see her face. Then there was Esther, 76. Bought her first iPad and started learning digital drawing. It makes me feel like a kid with a new box of crayons, she said. Growing isn't just for the young. It's for the curious, for the willing. It doesn't have to be something big. Sometimes it's learning to write with your left hand, or trying a new recipe, or saying yes to something before fear talks you out of it. When you believe your story is still unfolding, you stop watching the clock. You start getting into looking ahead. Every older adult I've met who kept growing had one thing in common: a certain light in their eyes, the light of someone still alive inside. If you've ever told yourself, I don't think I can change anymore, leave a comment with the number 10. If you still believe in new beginnings, type neural. Because you can still grow. You can still bloom. No matter the season. Conclusion. Living alone doesn't mean living less. But it does mean you have to show up for yourself. Over and over again. No one else can do that for you. Make your lunch like you're hosting someone important. Open the window every morning like you're greeting the day. Watch TV with intention, not just to fill the quiet. And when you pass by the mirror, look at yourself and say, so, I'm still here, I still matter. Life after 60, 70, even 80 isn't the end of the story. It's the middle. The part where you slow down, but also live deeper. Truer. If this video brought you a little warmth, a little reflection, or a reason to smile, please consider subscribing. Not for the numbers, but because you deserve gentle reminders like this more often. And if you're still watching right now, leave a comment. Any word, any number, even just a simple hello. Because maybe you'll be the reason someone else feels less alone today. We are never truly alone, as long as we're still talking to each other. Thank you for staying until the end.